The galactic hegemony never took humanity seriously. Not at first. We were a young species, barely a few centuries into spaceflight. We had no great fleets, no vast armies of war-forged titans. Our home world was an unremarkable blue dot in a minor arm of the galaxy, and our technology, while creative, was hardly revolutionary. Asterisk, before we start, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. Only 4% of my channel is subscribed. When it reaches 1,000 subscribers, I will release a special video. The first sign was a whisper in the void, an anomaly detected. Okay, now comes on the story. And yet, against all odds, we survived. We survived the Dralvok purge fleets, who believed our world would be easy prey. We survived the Synduc, its economic stranglehold, who sought to keep us as a resource vassal. We even survived the bureaucratic nightmare of the hegemony itself, which denied us full membership, relegating us to associate status, a polite way of calling us second-class beings. Through every slight, every attack, every attempt to erase us from the stars, we endured. Then the Khazir came, an apex predator species, known for their methodical extermination of weaker civilizations. The hegemony, unwilling to risk war, declared the attack on Earth an unfortunate territorial misunderstanding. The Khazir razed our colonies. They bombarded Mars. They poisoned Luna's domes. And then they descended on Earth, intent on finishing what they had started. The hegemony issued a stern diplomatic condemnation. Humanity issued a final warning. The galaxy expected our species to crumble, but we were not like the others. We had studied war long before we reached the stars. We did not meet the Khazir with honored duels or ritualized battles. We did not fight for glory, for territory, or for the favor of the hegemony. We fought to win, and so, when the Khazir fleets arrived in Sol, they did not find a broken species awaiting its execution. They found a graveyard of their own making. The first ships in their vanguard collapsed in on themselves, shredded by dense swarms of autonomous kill drones. The second wave was blinded by directed energy weapons that burned out their targeting systems before they ever fired a shot. The third wave, they didn't even reach orbit. Thousands of coordinated satellites, each one carrying enough firepower to delete a fleet, formed an unbreachable firewall. No brave space marines storming their ships. No battle-hardened warriors meeting them blade for blade. Just silent, calculated annihilation. When the Khazir ground forces deployed on Earth, they faced something even worse. They expected resistance. They did not expect scorched Earth. Cities were abandoned, booby-trapped with automated defenses, AI-controlled kill zones, and drone swarms that functioned independently of any central command. Every landing zone became a slaughterhouse. Every advance was met with an enemy that did not fight like the civilized species of the hegemony. We did not fight fair. We fought like a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of destruction. Within a month, Earth was cleansed of Khazir. Within a year, Khazir Prime, once the throne world of their vast empire, was a smoldering ruin. The species that had spent centuries exterminating others was now extinct. The hegemony panicked. They had never seen a species fight like us. Not with brute force, not with sheer numbers, but with merciless, efficient strategy. They called for restraint. For peace, humanity responded with silence. Then, one by one, the worlds that had stood by while Earth burned received their own final warnings. Some chose diplomacy. Others begged for forgiveness. And a few, the foolish few, thought they could stand against us. They are gone now. Not because we wanted war, but because we finished it. And now, when the hegemony speaks of humanity, they do not call us an upstart race. They do not call us a minor species. They call us the final warning, and they pray they never hear it again. Next story. Enjoy. For 100 years, the automatons have terrorized the galaxy. The crews around collecting data and attacking anything that gets close to it. Every big shot in the galaxy has taken their best shot at taking them down. All have failed. Work yet. The automatons appear to be learning from each attacker. The Kunish attacked the automatons. They took 3 entire hits before going down. They came back with even more powerful ships. What should have taken at least a dozen shots the automatons destroyed into. Every time the automatons are attacked, they scan the rubble, learn, and grow stronger. My squadron was headed towards a small system of a newly space-bound species. They had already terraformed their neighboring planet. They did it in an extremely barbaric method. They used a massive bomb on each of the poles of the planet, which should not have worked. Somehow this planet had weapons capable of delivering blasts of such extreme heat that they could completely remove a person's body from this realm, leaving only a shadow. Maybe they could defeat the automatons. We were closing in onto the planet, when suddenly 2 automatons appeared, and our scanners picked up to more on their way. We had the fastest ship in the Federation, but this was worrying. We managed to avoid the first volley of shots. Unfortunately, this meant that the automatons now knew how to hit us. Our weapons were struck, and we darted towards the planet known as Earth. The automatons stopped fire on us. They disabled our weapons and stopped firing. We had heard reports of this recently, that the automatons wouldn't kill defenseless ships anymore, but I hadn't believed it until now. As soon as we got to the 6th planet in the system, we were met by an Earth ship. They were way more advanced than we had thought. The ship looked like it was made 150 years ago. I could barely believe that it was able to fly. It looked like it was held on by simple nuts and bolts. I couldn't even see a magnetic coupling on the entire ship. The Earth ship established a communication link. I didn't see how it could do much good. Neither of us would have a translation link yet. "Hello, friends," said this ugly hairless creature on screen. "I am human Commander Luke Zalkin. We greet you to the Sol system." All mouths were left agape on our bridge. How could they speak our language? How did he know what we called their system? How did they get around the automatons? After a moment of shock, Commander Zunith spoke. Hello, Commander Zalkin. How do you know our language?" The human opened his lips in a curve, let out a weird series of exhales, then responded, "We have had probes explore the galaxy for around 150 years. We made translation software for a lot of the peoples. Probes. How have we not found them yet?" Before I could even try to understand, Commander Zunith asked another question. "What do you know about the automatons?" The human was quiet. He seemed to be thinking. He started to speak, but I couldn't understand him. I think he might have turned off his translation software. He spoke for a moment with someone off screen in his native tongue, then turned to us and said, "We made them." At first, this was outlandish. How could a species so inept at technology make the automatons? Their ships were practically made from sticks and stones, but so were the automatons. We thought that the automatons looked the way they did because they were old. We thought that the reason they kept appearing was because there were so many of them that we couldn't keep track. What if what the human said was true? And what if they were still making new ones? If our weapons hadn't been disabled, I would have opened fire on the humans right there. We made them to defend themselves and gather data. We didn't realize how much more powerful our weapons were. The human commander said. Commander Zunith looked just as shocked as I did. "You mean to tell me that the weapons you put on probes 150 years ago have been the terror of the galaxy?" I hadn't even thought of the implications this had on our standing as the Federation's sword. If it really was some black moth planet that created the automatons, we would be put to shame. We would like to visit the manufacturing plant to ensure that you are telling the truth. Commander Zalkin again spoke in his tongue for a moment, then turned to us and said, "We can let you see the manufacturing plant, but we can't let you take any kind of recordings. You understand? What with your special research?" I didn't know what he was talking about, but we probably had many classified projects that we didn't tell anyone about. Commander Zunith looked scared, surprised, and most of all intrigued. I see that your kind values information. I can understand that. We agree. He didn't even ask for confirmation from the Federation before directing us to follow the humans. Their ship was fast, faster than us. We thought we had fast ships, but we could tell that even though they were moving quite a bit faster, they were still not at full throttle. How their ship didn't fall apart from the threads is beyond me. Their planet was beautiful. Viewing it from outside of the atmosphere was a sight I will not forget. The beautiful greens, the plentiful blues, the white skies, and the orange landscapes. We landed in an area that was known as Area 53. It was a top-secret military base used to contain any alien technology. It was also where they made the automatons. The manufacturing plant was underground with artificial lights shining down on a gigantic factory. It reminded me of home. We had tried to make our manufacturing underground to stop pollution as well, but that didn't work for us. Their planet was so much more beautiful than ours, and somehow they hadn't killed it yet. After seeing the plant, we went back up to the surface. I had to ask, how did you keep your air so clean? Commander Zalkin looked at me and raised part of the hair that was on his face. One of his men spoke up. What do you mean? I was confused. Did they not know what pollution was? With all this manufacturing, how did you keep your carbon emissions from destroying your atmosphere? The commander pointed at a tall brown thing with beautiful green crowning it and said, "Those are called trees. They absorbed our carbon emissions." He started making weird shapes out of his hands. They breath in the carbon and breath out oxygen. The planet sustains itself, and these trees can breathe. I couldn't imagine that. How could they breathe? Are they alive? The wonder of the automatons was overshadowed by my wonder of this planet. If humans weren't the creator of those weapons, I would have suggested taking this planet for ourselves. Yes, the trees are alive. I'm sure I could convince the government to let you take some seeds with you, he said, motioning to one of his subordinates. Go get some cedar seeds. How could he just give away the seeds of life like this? The commander had the same question. What do you want in return? The commander showed his teeth again, closing his eyes and letting out that weird noise again. We just want some friends in the galaxy, he said. It is not good for man to be alone. Enjoy next story. They say that in the cosmic neighborhood, we were the first to wake. Not because we were special, we weren't, but because we were impatient. Earth's creatures had always been in a hurry, while other worlds waited for their suns to stabilize, for their atmospheres to perfect themselves, for evolution to take its methodical course. Life on Earth scrambled and adapted and evolved with desperate urgency. Perhaps it was the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, creating an evolutionary vacuum that mammals rushed to fill. Perhaps it was the precise rhythm of ice ages that forced adaptability. Or perhaps it was simply that our planet was slightly too close to its star, making us children raised in the knowledge that our home had an expiration date. Whatever the cause, by the time we looked up at the stars with understanding eyes, the galaxy was still dark and silent. We called it the Great Silence, and it terrified us. Where were the others? The mathematics said they should exist billions of stars, trillions of planets, countless opportunities for life. Yet, when we listened, we heard nothing. When we searched, we found nothing. Just empty worlds waiting to be born, or dead worlds that had missed their chance. We were alone, and we were dying. Earth was failing faster than we had predicted. Climate systems collapsed in cascading failures. Resources dwindled as populations swelled. Wars erupted over the last habitable regions. The great silence outside was matched by a growing silence on Earth as species vanished one by one. It was in this darkness that the Exodus program was born. Not as a triumph of exploration, but as a desperate bid for survival. We cobbled together generation ships from what remained of Earth's resources. We selected the passengers through lotteries. That tore families apart. We launched these arcs toward distant worlds that might support human life, knowing that those who departed would never see their destination, and those who arrived would be descendants who knew Earth only through stories. The day of the final launch, the sky was red with dust and smoke. The last ship rose on a pillar of fire, carrying 10,000 souls and the genetic records of 1 million extinct species. As it vanished into the clouds, those left behind turned to the difficult work of dying with dignity, but something unexpected happened in the cold between stars. Freed from the constraints of a dying world, humanity flourished in its artificial environments. The generation ships became not tombs, as many had feared, but cradles of renaissance. New philosophies emerged in the void. New technologies blossomed in the absence of Earth's remaining prejudices and politics. Children born among the stars developed adaptations, some engineered, some spontaneous to their new homes. By the time the first ship reached its destination, a small rocky world orbiting a red dwarf, its passengers had become something more than the humans who had departed Earth. They were starfolk now, with patience to match their ambition. They found their new world barren but promising. Using techniques perfected during the journey, they seeded it with engineered microorganisms designed to transform the atmosphere molecule by molecule. They buried themselves in underground habitats and prepared to wait. It would take centuries, perhaps millennia, but they had learned the art of time. As the centuries passed, humanity branched further. Each colony world became its own experiment in evolution and culture. Some altered themselves to better suit their new homes. Others altered their worlds to suit human needs. A few abandoned physical form entirely, uploading their consciousness into vast computational arrays powered by their stars, and all of them wondered about the Great Silence. Then, after nearly 50,000 years of expansion, a research outpost in the galactic core detected something extraordinary: faint radio signals from a distant spiral arm. The patterns were unmistakably artificial but primitive, reminiscent of humanity's first radio transmissions. The signals were coming from a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, a world where life was just beginning to develop intelligence. A world where creatures were looking up at the night sky and wondering if they were alone. We had our answer at last. We weren't alone, we were simply early. In the vast cosmic timeline, Earth's life had accelerated too quickly, burning through its resources before its star had even reached middle age. We had evolved, industrialized, and nearly destroyed ourselves millions of years before most planets would produce their first sapient species. The silence hadn't been an absence of life. It had been the silence of potential, of worlds still young, still becoming. What does a species do with such knowledge? Some argued for isolation, for allowing these emerging intelligences to develop without interference. Others advocated for guidance, for sharing the hard lessons we had learned. The debate continues even now across thousands of worlds and trillions of minds, but all agree on one thing: we who were born in darkness and fear have become the shepherds of light. We who nearly extinguished ourselves have become the gardeners of new life. We who fled a dying world have become the custodians of 1 million living ones. The universe, we discovered, was not dark because it was empty. It was dark because the lights were still being kindled, and in our desperate haste to survive, we had become the first light bringers. In the end, our impatience, the very trait that nearly destroyed us, became our salvation and our purpose. We were too early, yes, but perhaps the universe needed someone to be first. Perhaps it needed someone to make the mistakes, map the dangers, and light the way. Perhaps it needed us. Enjoy another story. I can finally say I've tasted the worm jerky that the One Heat Seeker's ship was named after. It wasn't as bad as I expected, extra chewy, and this kind had a sharp flavor that changed wildly between bites, because that's the variety that Paint liked the most, she said. It's best if you hold it between your teeth and run your tongue along it to get all the flavors. It's a full fan of sharpness values. Her lizardy face was excited as she demonstrated, looking like a kid playing with gummy candy. If that kid was also an orange-scaled lizard alien, I didn't bother trying to make sense of the phrasing. Full fan was probably something like rainbow. I just cleaned my mouth with a handful of cheesy crackers that I wasn't going to subject everyone else to, and waited for my turn. We had a day to burn while waiting for our next delivery client to meet us, and a visit to the space station's market had ended with half the crew picking items of their own species' origins to share with the rest. Eggskin the medic was on hand just in case. Oh boy, it was my turn next. What omnivore nonsense have you come up with? Moore asked, folding his blue-black tentacles sternly. It had better not involve that infant food liquid. Nope. No dairy products, I said, picking up the heavy box under my chair. Eggskin tapped a claw against their tablet full of biological info. I've ruled out anything likely to cause digestive distress, and that definitely counts. Yes. No? Pizza today. More's the pity. I set the box on the table. This should actually be fun. Marble soda. I opened the top and began passing them out. Marble what? Asked Blip, frills waving curiously. Is this a drink? G wanted to know. He angled his antennae into a look of suspicion. Treely held a similar expression across the table. It's a fun drink, I said. There's a special trick to opening it. The soda itself isn't that special. The most popular brand is named after a mispronunciation of a common flavor in another language, though they make a bunch of other flavors, too. Anyways, it's a bubbly drink with a fruit flavor. This one's strawberry. And Eggskin says it's safe enough to try. Eggskin nodded their scaly head. I wouldn't recommend large quantities, but yes. The bubbles are carbon dioxide, and the fruit is in trace amounts. I like fruit, Paint said bravely, clutching the bottle. How do we open it? Right? Everybody watch me. First, you peel off the plastic wrap. I demonstrated, exposing the plastic contraption that had something of a learning curve even among my own people. Now this bit is in two parts. You have to pop the centerpiece out, cause that's the part you actually need, and this part you set aside. It just keeps the bottle from opening early. I separated the two and held them up. Everyone was watching carefully. Good. I continued. I can help with that if you need. Once you have this part, though, you just place it against the top, give it some pressure, and it pops the marble down into the bottle. With a flourish, I leaned a palm onto the little plastic doohickey until the marble separated with a satisfying pop. Paint made a quiet ooh noise while Blop flapped his frills in surprise. Now you have to make sure the marble doesn't just roll back to block the opening when you drink it, I said. These dents will catch it. You just have to hold it at the right angle, like this. I took a sip and the marble stayed where it was supposed to. When I put it down, the air was full of the crinkling of plastic as my alien co-workers got to work on the wrapping. Some had an easier time than others. Oh, you're supposed to rip it along the tiny holes, Paint said, having already sliced it off with a claw. I didn't see that. This is not meant for tentacles, Moore griped. He tried twisting it, but no luck. Here, let me. I put out a hand, ready to remove the wrap quickly and help the others. Blip and Blop should be fine, but the Mesmers, with their praying mantis pincher arms, might find this awkward. They had those tiny little wrist fingers, but identical pops sounded from opposite sides of the table. I turned to find G and Treely each holding a bottle with one pincher. They'd used the other to stab through the top, not bothering to remove the plastic wrap first. Well, that's one way to do it. I said .zhe, he said. Seemed faster. He peeled off the wrapping now with one deft pincher tip while Treely simply wrenched hers away. A thunk sounded as Blip misjudged the angle and tipped her bottle over instead of opening it. Next to her, Blop was having trouble finding a finger small enough to separate the plastic bits. I hurried to unwrap Mer's drink and help. Paint had a little difficulty getting enough leverage to press down on the top, but Eggskin figured it out and gave her a hand, standing on the seat and using their body weight. One way or another, everybody got their bottles open. They tried it, and everybody hated it. If the bubbles are regular air, why do they taste so bad? Blip wanted to know. I think it's the fruit flavor that's tangy. Blop said. Zhee hissed quietly. You mean fruit's not supposed to taste rancid? It's a drink that fights back, and I can respect that, Treely declared. But this is not a battle I'm interested in fighting. Moore took a sip and shuddered, sending rippling tentacles in all directions. Ooh, it tastes like static shock and the wrong part of a plant. That's a pity, I said. It's pretty good as far as I'm concerned. Unexpectedly, Paint said, I like it. It kind of bites you at first, but then it reminds me of an overripe galaxy fruit. And the bottle is interesting. Glad to hear it. I said. So everybody hated it except for Paint. And Eggskin probably, who didn't make any loud declarations, but they did drink the whole thing. I call that a win. Well, that was a fascinating disaster, G said, shoving his bottle towards the middle of the table. Onto my turn. Moore grumbled something that sounded like, oh great. He'd already dumped his soda down the sink and kept the bottle as a fidget toy, sticking a thin tentacle in and batting the marble around. I sipped my own and waited to see what G would bring out. I considered myself lucky to be on the omnivorous side of things. Theoretically, anything he came up with should be fine, but of course, theory only goes so far. Everyone here is okayed for animal-based nutrition, G said, setting down an opaque bag, so everyone ought to enjoy this one. Except for Treely, who has no taste. Treely did the Mesmer equivalent of sticking her tongue out at him, which involved a disturbing configuration of mandibles. G opened the bag and began removing little sealed tubs. I give you first week brains with the best vitamin sauce. I sank down in my seat, still holding the bottle and not eager to grab a sample of brains. Even when Eggskin clarified that the sauce was vitamin C and ought to taste like citrus, it didn't sound particularly appealing. G was proud of it, though. Apparently, this was the best food in the universe, favored by all the best chefs of his species. Anyway, and there was nothing anyone could say to ruin his enjoyment of it, even if everyone else present was as uncultured as TRRILI. It occurred to me that I could probably ruin his meal by telling him about his resemblance to the fried crickets that were easy to find back home, but I decided against it. I just drank my marble soda and enjoyed watching Treely argue with him instead. Shared early on Patron Cross posted a Tumblr and Humancer Aspects book that takes place after the short stories. Is Heredity sequel is in progress and will include characters from the stories. Next story enjoy, I hope. Why did you do it? There were other ways to get what you wanted, perhaps. Or perhaps it still wouldn't have amounted to anything. You've lost either way. And are not answering the question. A sort of legend, a chosen one to claim it, and a monster to slay. The three key parts of a journey had come together and bloomed into a sweeping tragedy. It was not the first time. It may not be the last. Lord Varian sat on his throne in the highest tower of a castle that stood upon a mountain overlooking half a continent. All the world he'd ever known was laid out before him. Half of it was encased in black glass, now glowing with an ancient fire that had taken over his very soul. The rest of the land was scorched and razed, or only just coming out from under an iron fist to peer hesitantly at the freedom and light it had been granted. I won't put my actions on the flame. You're wiser than that. Temptation needs someone weak enough to sway, does it not? Varian laughed, which turned into a choking cough. He held up his hand against the light. The wide glass window, faintly blackened if you looked closely, filtered sun rays onto the stone floor and the hangings. It also revealed blood in the Lord's hand that was no longer the right color, and what tempted you so badly you did. The one asking Varian questions was young, not a boy. That had been at the start. Wars, heroics, these things both take time. But young enough that it was still easy to tell that he had likely never been granted time to properly settle into his role. All of this. The hero gestured towards the window. Varian had been surprised when the swordsman who slew him ordered everyone else to clear the room. Varian had been declared a non-threat. The sword that had siphoned his power, still embedded in his chest, slowly pooling his blood onto the floor, had been proof enough. Besides, you've earned it, haven't you? Stopping it. Lord Varian looked down at the blade, debated prying it out, if only for appearance's sake. But it wouldn't matter either way. Stopping what? The cycle. Varian looked out the window at a time and place that had long passed him and everyone else by. You should know by now what it truly entails. Perhaps I don't. Enlighten me. The hero had been named Cavil Hearthwood. A simple name for a simple boy from nowhere particularly special. He'd had training as a merchant's son, brought up into knighthood at the same time to curry favor with a small lord. When Lord Varian had set out on his own journey, he hadn't been granted even that. Varian had known of Cavil. He'd let him live out of a desire to clash swords properly, to prove the path he walked was more righteous than the one who'd inherited his old task. He had failed. I was jealous of you at first. Look at this boy, not from the slums. No Grand King's heir, but still, calm life, calm home. When I picked up that sword, I hadn't even been allowed to keep my squalor. Is that why you set so much aside for the Darklings? I grew up expecting a cruel monster. And you were, but you were other things, too. I chose to think you could only be one for a long time. The first High Lord burned down the place I'd grown. I'd never loved it, but I'd also never fully hated the people in it. He was evil. I never hid his stories for a reason. But I wanted to be better. I wanted the world to be better. Varian closed his eyes, picturing a dark visage standing tall in black armor and carrying fire in his blade and his heart. When he opened them, all he saw was Cavil and the world he'd tried to conquer. Then why oppress the people? Why not be gentle? Hatred, fear. I went through all the trials. The whole way, they whispered in my ear, I must slay the great demon, dethrone the tyrant, that the world would be better when he was gone. So I did. I went from slum rat to hero, and I killed everything standing in my way. They taught me purpose, not mercy. Varian breathed a rattling breath. There was so much to tell. Where could he even start? What wisdom could he impose? What regrets could he voice? He didn't have time. I think that is why my mentor taught me you were not a monster, but a man. I think I see why now. Cavil looked at him with those weary but certain eyes of his. He had a nasty scar running down half his face. It looked like he'd been savaged by a dog. Varian could not quite remember where the wound had come from, in what battle of theirs it had originated. But he supposed true heroes were not as clean-looking as they were in the stories. Mine brought me to the top of this mountain. I did. As he asked, I thought I would go home after. But they wanted a leader. Heroes cannot be kings. Did you learn that along the way here? I did not. All I could see was that the pain did not stop. Corrupt things of a new flavor stepped from the shadows to take theplaces of the old ones. Money, power, land, insults. Those became my world instead of provings and slayings. And I could not handle it. Did you ever just want to stop? Of course. And I could have. But I thought of all the things that would be out of my control if I did. If I wanted to keep the sword, I needed to wield it. I ended the greatest threat in the known world. How could I not be capable of ruling an empire? Varian slowly shook his head. I failed. So I chose to wield it against those I could not control. They gave me the power to save them and to punish them. My master, I killed first. Do you regret it? Some of it, other parts, not so much. Lord Varian was quiet for a time. His chest slowly rose and fell. His eyes opened and closed as the world started to blur. I wish I could tell you the whole story. But there's never enough time for details. People only want the ending. Never the people who have to make the trek for them. Who did you fight for, Varian? Varian paused. He tilted his head slightly and found he could not sit straight again. His hands went numb. He dropped something small and black that glittered in the light. Slowly, he forced his eyes to turn to it. I loved someone they did not want me to. Her god would let me fight for her. So I let myself be foolish enough to think I could wield the one blade they'd never asked me to. I think, if I'm being truthful, I reveled in the idea of doing what they'd most hate. Cavil said nothing else. He simply asked his questions and listened to what little the dying Lord of the Continent could offer in words before he passed on. So, Varian asked the man who would take his place something himself. Why did you want to talk to me, anyway? Did you expect me to plead? Beg for forgiveness? Tell you all my sins and regrets? No, I just wanted to know what came next. They prepared me for it. But they did not tell me what it was. I'm afraid. Cavil looked surprised for the first time. A small slip of composure in the quiet visage of someone who'd won his greatest battle and only had to pass time waiting for the next. Of death. No, that nobody learned a thing. I think some people did. And that they'll teach everyone else better for next time. Cavil paused for a moment, looking out towards the window. I think I want to make sure of it. Lord Varian waited for death, and it came. Anything else he had to say, he had no time left to tell it, or it wouldn't change much. But he contemplated a final few thoughts as everything dimmed and went black. You won long before this. When she died, control and freedom both demand sacrifice. There'll be more loss. I just hope that you'll deal with it better than I can. He smiled without realizing it. A merchant's boy, pupil to an honest knight, in a world of brigands, and to patient and to tired to revel in victory and vengeance. He would do fine. Varian just wished he'd gotten to come out as wise as Cavil had. This next story is very good. The crowd roared as Matthias Moro stepped into the arena. The venue itself was a massive, open-air coliseum carved into the heart of a mountainous landscape, with towering stone walls lined with banners bearing the sigils of the warring factions. Thousands of spectators filled the stands. Alien dignitaries, warriors, politicians, and common folk alike all gathered to witness the outcome of the combat trial. High above, warships from both sides loomed in orbit, their distant forms barely visible against the afternoon sky. Moro exhaled, rolling his shoulders slightly as he stepped forward onto the stone platform at the center of the arena. He could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. He had walked into war zones, into rooms filled with tyrants, assassins, and politicians alike, but there was something different about standing here, unarmed in appearance, being judged solely by the merit of his ability to kill. The Tyrant of Terra, that was what they called him, a name whispered in fear, in reverence, in anger. And now, it seemed, he was to prove why he deserved such a title once again. Behind him, just beyond the entrance to the Colosseum floor, a small detachment of Terran operatives lurked in the shadows. Saboteurs, special forces, men and women who had been deployed not to interfere in the fight, but to ensure that if this was an ambush, the ambushers would not walk away from it. Moro had learned long ago that war was rarely fought on just one battlefield. He carried himself with an air of effortless control, his uniform crisp, polished to a degree that seemed almost mocking in the face of what was to come. No combat armor, no exosuit, no external indication of his defenses, just the tailored fabric of a diplomat, a high-ranking representative of the Terran Alliance. The only thing out of place was the rifle slung over his back. His knife and pistol remained hidden, tucked away beneath the layers of his uniform. And, of course, his kinetic shield hummed invisibly around his body, unseen, undetected. The crowd fell into a hushed murmur as he approached the dueling circle. Then, his opponent stepped forward, a massive, hulking figure, a brute of war, easily over 8 feet tall, covered in thick, overlapping armor plates that blended seamlessly with their natural carapace. Their presence alone radiated raw aggression, a being bred for destruction, for slaughter, and Moro knew them. This was not General Rosen. It wasn't even a Vartai. A slow chill ran through him as he studied the creature before him, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. This species shouldn't exist anymore. He had personally ensured that it was impossible. And yet, standing before him was one of them, a member of the Virgil, a species humanity had fought, bled against, and ultimately annihilated after they refused to end their brutal raids on Terran colonies. They had been relentless, merciless, leaving entire planets in ruin, devouring resources, enslaving survivors. Moro had ended them. He had ordered the orbital bombardments. He had signed the writ that had called for their eradication. He had seen to it that their worlds burned, watched their warlords fall, ensured that they could never threaten humanity again. And yet, here one stood, the Virgil warrior spread, its arms wide, its voice a guttural bellow that echoed across the arena. "So it is you." The creature snarled, its mandibles clicking with something between amusement and pure hatred. The tyrant of Terra himself. The butcher, the scourge of the stars. Moro's face remained unreadable, but beneath the surface, he was analyzing every possible scenario. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't a distant relative species, wasn't some offshoot that had been overlooked. No, this was a true Virgilla remnant of something that should not exist, a mistake. No, he didn't make mistakes when it came to exterminations. Your kind were wiped out, Moro stated, his voice even, his words carrying across the arena. The Virgil let out a deep, chittering laugh. So you thought, so humanity thought, but you cannot erase what was bred for war. You think yourselves gods, deciding which races live and which die. The warrior raised a clawed hand, curling it into a fist. You should have burned the stars themselves, to be sure. Moro's jaw tightened slightly. We did. He said nothing, letting the words hang in the air. The Virgil's mandibles flexed, its beady, predatory eyes narrowing with something cruel. You slaughtered my people, my kin. You hunted us like rats, purged us like vermin. And now I stand here, before you, alive. The crowd murmured at that, whispers of confusion, disbelief. Some of the gathered officials had heard the stories. They knew that the Virgil were extinct, and yet, here one stood. Moro exhaled through his nose, keeping his body language composed, his hand steady. He could feel Elira's presence, watching, though she said nothing. Her hard light projection wouldn't appear here. She wasn't allowed to interfere. But through their connection, he could feel something else. Tension. He wasn't the only one unsettled by this. The Virgil extended a clawed hand, pointing directly at him. I have been given the honor of avenging my people, here, now, in front of all who watch. This is your reckoning, tyrant of Terra. Moro remained still for a moment. Then he took a step forward, his voice cutting through the weight of the arena. I didn't come here to answer for what was done, he said, his words sharp as a blade. I came here to ensure that humanity does not need to do it again. A growl rumbled deep in the Virgil's chest. We shall see, Butcher. The adjudicator, a tall, robed figure standing at the edge of the arena, raised their hands for silence. The combat trial has been agreed upon, they announced. The terms are set. There will be no interference, no retreat, no mercy. The crowd roared in anticipation. Moro adjusted his stance slightly, feeling the weight of his rifle at his back, the concealed weight of his knife and pistol beneath. His uniform, Elira's voice brushed against the edges of his thoughts. So soft it was barely there. Be careful. Moro let out a slow breath. Then, as the final call rang out across the arena, he met the Virgil's gaze and allowed himself the faintest, sharpest smile. I always am. Enjoy other story. Mother has always been afraid of the other species. She says we must never reveal our true selves to anyone, or else something really bad will happen. Since birth, she has covered my body with clothes and skins, saying that our scales give us away since we are the only ones with them. When I came of age and began walking upright, she forced me to walk like the others, insisting that our natural gait is strange. She said I needed to move like them to blend in, so since then, I have wrapped myself in black cloth to cover my scales, binding my tail in bandages to make it appear smaller. I walk with my spine straight and my tail pointed downward, instead of trailing behind me. Last year, my mother died scared and worried. I was never told why, but before she passed, she made me promise never show my true self to anyone. Live quietly. Live peacefully. Gaia. Get your ass up and prep for decamp. A carcinic male yells at me. Once again, I woke up too early and have to leave my bed cold and slow. No doubt I'll get yelled at for that too. My bandages have loosened, meaning I'll have to spend extra time tightening them. Next station stop Gaia. When we land, I'm quitting, taking a week for myself. Hopefully, they have some quick dry stations I can use to warm up. Approaching Gaia Station now, serving 123 trillion souls. Currently celebrating our 4th century anniversary event. All visitors are required to decontaminate before entry. All weapons must be shut down and unloaded. Gaia Station. The place I was named after. Mother told me she chose my name because this station is an important part of our people's history. That one day, I would need to come here to learn where we came from. The station is massive even for a space station. It towers over the planet it orbits, eclipsing the twin stars behind it. Built from a single core station, the original Gaia Station, it has since expanded, with multiple other stations welded into it. It's an incredible sight from every angle. Ships and shuttles pour out of the station in a constant stream. So many that, from a distance, they look like a flowing river, glimmering under the twin suns like the universe itself has condensed into a single, shining current. Gaia Station serving its people and keeping you safe. Gaia Station Hour. Past may be dark, but we serve for the future. Gaia Station let those who seek darkness answer in blood. Okay, these announcements are starting to get ridiculous. Hello, welcome to Gaia Station. Please lock all weapons and enjoy your stay. Decamp took a while, but now that I'm here, I might as well check out the celebrations. The main hall is packed. Thousands of different species mingle, trade, and argue over money. Some are as tall as starships, towering over the crowd, while others are so small they need tubing rails along the walls just to move safely without getting crushed. The hall itself stretches for miles, but I only have one destination in mind, Gaia. Hall. Mother wanted to take me there one day. She said it was the original ship that Gaia Station was built around the place where I could learn our true history. After a bit of searching and asking for directions, I finally find myself somewhere completely different from the rest of the station. The sleek metal and glass give way to old, rusted black metal. Large bolts hold the walls together. There are no viewports, just dim lights, barely bright enough to see. The atmosphere is haunting. No children scream and run around. No constant chatter in 100 different tongues. Nothing but silence. The occasional sound of footsteps drags from exhibit to exhibit. The floor is covered in a black carpet with arrows in various colors, each leading somewhere different. Every few feet, the arrows are labeled with etched names, detailing where they go. My arrow is easy to find. It's the only one with lights, jagged and dark red, lined with bright LEDs. Though some have worn out from years of use, the name is scrolled across it. Tragedy of Gaia. I start at the beginning. The first exhibit retells the story of Earth, the cradle world of humanity. It shows the planet's wide array of species and explains how humans were not the first to walk its surface. At one point, it was dominated by giant monstrous dinosaurs until they were wiped out. The next exhibit covers humanity's 6 world wars and the cracking of Mars during their War of the Worlds, a war so devastating that all humans abandoned their colonies and returned to Earth. A short video plays depicting the fall of Hydron, humanity's first FTL-capable super-destroyer. The cost of building and immediately losing it triggered a domino effect. Humanity lost its faith in war. They stopped making combat ships entirely, shifting their focus to peaceful exploration. And then Gaia. The first thing you see when you enter this part of the exhibit is a statue. Obsidian. It depicts several human children wearing old-fashioned suits, their hands full of flowers and gifts. Each child reaches forward toward the viewer, offering small open boxes. Inside are edible treats made from non-toxic ingredients so that anyone of any species can enjoy them. Beneath the statue, an obsidian plaque lists names and dates. The very first name, Alicia Gay Perez, April 10th, 6031-6046. Below it, an inscription, "We reached toward the sky with love. You taught us to reach to the sky with spears." Next to it, a video plays on a loop. A live stream recorded long ago. It shows the same human children walking up to someone who looks like me. The human reaches out with a gift, the Surth. Male reaches out, grabbing her by the neck and snapping it. The video cuts there, but I have a feeling that wasn't the end of it. The next display reads, "The Surth Hunt, images, videos, humans hunting Surth, transport vessels blown apart, simply for carrying one, planets turning to dust." And the final image, a large, brown-green planet, labeled Surth Cradle. The next image, the same planet, glassed into a marble. Now it makes sense why Mother made me walk funny. Why she never let me go outside without covering myself. I am SERTH. She was scared. Scared of humans. Scared of what they'd do if they found us. But one thing doesn't make sense. The videos show humans tracking Surth, no matter where they hid, like they could sense them. So why did they never come for us? I keep searching. There's one final exhibit. It's tucked away in the back. The red-lit arrows leading to it slowly shift first to pink, then to a soft, glowing white. Inside is a large box, a baby's cradle. Empty. Next to it, a statue. 2 ships. Locked in a silent stare. Down. A transcript is displayed below. Human, a Captain Herc. You have a Surth on board. Surrender them to the void of space, and you and your crew will be allowed to leave intact. I'm giving you 30 minutes, Captain Herc. The Surth is already dead. We can still send the body out the airlock, but there's a problem. Human, send the body. I didn't hit you hard enough to damage your airlocks, Captain Herc. It's not just the body. There's another Surth, but it's not fully Surth. Human, a hybrid. What species, Captain Herc? Human. In Joyt's story, as the inhabitants of Earth clashed in the streets, they sent forth their warriors to assault the Thraxian stronghold. The Thraxian ground commander designated Madagascar because of its proximity to the origins of humanity, Africa. The Madagascar headquarters featured a Thraxian frigate in low orbit, hovering just above the island to offer immediate support for the HQ or to launch an assault force onto the nearby continent. The island itself was home to 2 complete Thraxian divisions, populated with mechanized units, fighters, bombers, dropships, tanks, and more. This was among the most fortified and advanced locations of the ground commander, the bulk of NATO and the recently formed alliance of the Terran Republic have dispatched their naval forces towards this stronghold to impede and potentially disrupt Thraxian operations in the African, European theater. This is what transpired. The halls of the carrier flashed red, accompanied with a distinct and repeated alarm. The entire ship shifted and buckled against the great waves of the Indian Ocean as the sounds of combat pierced the hull of the great ship. The young officer in a pilot flight suit rushes through the halls of the ship, unlocking and opening a bulkhead door to reveal the flight deck of the carrier. Lieutenant Sarah Chen burst through the final hatch onto the flight deck. Salt spray stung her face as waves crashed against the Eisenhower's hull. Above, Thraxian fighters swooped through clouds of flak like angry metal wasps, their plasma weapons painting purple streaks across the sky. "Move it, Lieutenant!" Chief Martinez waved her toward her F-18, the ground crew already prepping it for launch. A Japanese destroyer, the Kirishima, unleashed a barrage of surface-to-air missiles. 2 Thraxian bombers disappeared in balls of fire, their wreckage splashing into the Indian Ocean. The massive Thraxian frigate loomed overhead like a steel thundercloud, its hull scarred from repeated missile strikes. Chen sprinted across the deck, ducking as a plasma bolt melted through a parked helicopter. The carrier's SIBS guns chattered, filling the air with tungsten. A British Type 45 destroyer joined the fight, its Sea Viper missiles streaking upward in pairs. Chen reached her Super Hornet and climbed the ladder. The cockpit sealed around her as she ran through pre-flight checks. Through the canopy, she watched French Rafale jets dogfight with alien craft, missiles and plasma crisscrossing the sky. The deck pitched violently. A Korean destroyer split completely down the middle as the frigate's main gun fired. The Eisenhower's flight deck crew scrambled to secure aircraft and clear debris. The flight deck erupted in flames as a Thraxian fighter strafed the bow. Purple beams carved through an F-18's fuselage like butter, splitting it in half. The remaining pieces tumbled into the ocean, leaving behind a trail of burning jet fuel. Get down. Chief Martinez tackled a young sailor as another beam sliced through the air where his head had been. The plasma cut a glowing trench across the deck plating. Chen's hands flew across the cockpit controls. Through her canopy, she watched deck crews scatter as more fighters dove toward the carrier. The CIWS guns tracked upward, their streams of bullets connecting with one alien craft. It spiraled down trailing smoke, clipping the island's superstructure before vanishing into the waves. A plasma bolt struck near the bow catapult. 3 deck crew vanished in a flash of light, their bodies reduced to ash. The deck plating glowed cherry red where they had stood. Launch stations compromised. The radio crackled, rerouting to Cat 3. The carrier's port side anti-aircraft guns opened up, filling the sky with flak. A Thraxian fighter caught multiple hits. The craft exploded, raining burning debris across. The flight deck, "Move that bird now," Martinez pointed toward a damaged Super Hornet blocking the taxiway. Its pilot lay slumped over the controls, cockpit glass melted through by plasma fire. The deck crew rushed to push it aside. A plasma beam swept across the deck, cutting through both men and the fighter's wing. The severed wing crashed onto the deck as the men's bisected bodies toppled. Chen's stomach lurched as the carrier heeled hard to port, emergency sirens blaring. Through gaps in the smoke, she glimpsed more Thraxian fighters diving from above, their weapons charging with purple light. The remaining CIWS guns thundered in response, desperate to keep them at bay. A near miss splashed plasma across her canopy, instantly melting patterns in the bulletproof glass. Warning lights flashed as her instruments detected the extreme heat. Around her, the organized chaos of the flight deck had devolved into pure mayhem as crews fought to save both ships and lives. "Shooters ready," the catapult officer gave her. The signal. Chen thought to herself while looking above at the battle taking place. She recognized the likelihood of her returning back home and decided that didn't matter anymore. Chen saluted, gripping the stick as steam built beneath her jet. The frigate took another hit, this time from a German cruise missile that opened. A glowing wound in its belly, her jet rocketed forward, pressing her back in her seat as she joined the aerial battle. The combined NATO fleet's guns blazed in synchronized fury. Through her visor, Chen watched Italian, Greek, and Turkish warships launch salvos that hammered the alien vessel. The frigate's shields flickered and failed under the onslaught, leaving it vulnerable to the storm of missiles rising from Earth's assembled warships. Chen banked hard as plasma fire streaked past her canopy. The Indian carrier INS Vikramaditya disappeared in a blinding purple flash, its hull splitting apart as secondary explosions chained through its magazines. Burning debris and bodies scattered across the waves. Multiple bandits bearing 270. Her radar lit up with new contacts pouring from the frigate's launch bays. The Madagascar airfields released waves of Thraxian fighters, their angular shapes black against the morning sun. The Italian destroyer Giuseppe Garibaldi was hit next, a direct hit from the frigate's main gun vaporizing its forward section. The stern slowly rolled over, lifeboats launching from its remaining deck. Fox 3. Chen squeezed the trigger, her AMRAAM missile tracking a Thraxian fighter. The alien craft jinked but couldn't shake the missile, exploding in a shower of metallic fragments. The Greek frigates caught coordinated plasma fire from above. Their hulls glowed cherry red before structural failure sent them beneath the waves. Chen's eyes darted between her radar, the sea battle below, and the swarm of boogies filling her vision. "Watch your 6, another Super Hornet pilot warned. Chen rolled inverted as plasma bolts sizzled through her previous position. 3 Thraxian fighters screamed past, breaking formation to engage the human aircraft. The Madagascar base launched another wave. Chen's threat warning screamed as multiple locks painted her jet. She punched countermeasures, white-knuckling the stick through a series of defensive maneuvers. A French Rafale exploded off her wing, forcing her to fly through the debris field. There, everywhere, someone shouted over the radio. Chen's radar showed the sky thick with bandits. She counted at least 40 new contacts rising from the island. Her head swiveled constantly, trying to track threats from all directions while avoiding friendly fire and watching for survivors in the water below. The frigate's point defense grid lit up, creating a lethal web of plasma fire to British Typhoons. Disappeared into fireballs as they tried to press an attack run. Chen's missile warning tone became a constant shriek as she fought to survive in the chaos. "There's too many on me. Someone help me." So the radio cut, another fireball appearing in the skies. Missiles, plasma, fireballs, and fighters fill the air like hundreds of pissed-off wasps. Chen gains another lock on a Thraxian fighter quickly, closing the gap on a French Rafale that had just successfully shot down a Thraxian bomber targeting the USS Eisenhower. Fox to a Sidewinder missile is deployed out from under her right wing. Due to how close she went to the fighter, the resulting explosion sprinkled her cockpit with pieces. Through the chaos, Chen spotted the silhouettes of marine assault ships. Moving into position, the USS Wasp and USS America cut through the waves, their decks flooding as they prepared to release their armored payload. All aircraft, this is mad actual. Protect those amphib carriers at all costs. Marines are going. In hot, LAV-25s and AAVS emerged from the ship's gaping maws, plunging into the churning sea. Their tracks bit into the water as they formed up, pushing toward the beach through curtains of plasma fire. Chen dove her Super Hornet low, drawing enemy attention away from the vulnerable vehicles. Multiple submarine launches detected. The radio crackled, nuclear-tipped cruise missiles inbound. The frigate's point defense grid lit up again, swatting missiles from the sky in rapid succession. Each detonation sent electromagnetic pulses rippling through the battlefield, disrupting sensors and communications. Combat networks flickered and died, forcing pilots to rely on visual contact and basic radio channels. They're picking off our nukes. We need to punch through those defenses. White Company, maintain formation and prepare for beach assault. Chen's eyes locked on the last missile streaking toward the alien vessel. The frigate's guns tracked it, ready to blast it from existence. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the sky like deadly fireflies, creating a near-impenetrable web of destruction. Without hesitation, she pushed her throttle forward and dove between the missile and the incoming plasma fire. "Lieutenant, what are you doing? Break off! Break off now!" The desperate command crackled through her failing comms, distorted but unmistakable, making sure this one gets through. Her voice was steel, unflinching. Not a tremor betrayed the terror clawing at her insides as she maintained her deadly intercept course. Feng 3 forming on your wing. A Chinese J-15 fighter pulled alongside Chen's Super Hornet, the pilot speaking in Mandarin. 2 more fighters, a French Rafale and an Indian MiG-9K, fell into formation. Missile defense understood. The Indian pilot's voice crackled. MiG-3 engaging bandits high. Plasma fire streaked past as the formation tightened. The French pilot barrel rolled his Rafale, spraying cannon fire at approaching Thraxian fighters. Hostiles A. Cotter hers, Rafale 6, Fox 2, the Chinese. J-15 climbed sharply, drawing enemy fire away from Chen and the cruise missile. Duo J di Jiran Kong Shang Fang Lakesea. Multiple bogeys? Hi. His afterburners lit up the sky as he engaged 3 Thraxian craft. Deco, Timor at 9. The Indian pilot snap-rolled, his MiG's missiles finding their mark. A Thraxian fighter spiraled into the ocean trailing smoke. Attention, ILS noose encirclant. The Rafale pilot juked hard right as plasma bolts sizzled past his canopy. His fighter shuddered under the strain. The J-15 pilot grunted as he pulled high-G maneuvers. Bu Nang Rang Tom En Tong Wo, cannot let them through. His cannon barked, shredding an alien fighter's wing. A plasma bolt caught the Rafale's tail section. G. Suisse Touché, systems failing. The French jet banked away trailing smoke before exploding. In a fireball, taking heavy fire. The Indian pilot's voice was tight with strain. His MiG weaved through the chaos. A direct blast vaporized his right wing, sending the fighter into an uncontrollable spin. But one mere soth high, the J-15 swooped low, drawing fire from multiple directions. Jixu Qianjin, continue mission, plasma bolts found their mark, the Chinese fighter disappearing in a purple flash. Chen pushed forward, the cruise missile, tracking straight and true behind her surviving Super Hornet. The sacrifices of her wingmen had cleared a path through the frigate's defenses. Her Super Hornet took multiple hits, cockpit systems failing as plasma ate through the fuselage like acid through tissue paper. Warning alarms and lights blared as structural integrity dropped into the red, the airframe groaning under catastrophic stress. Smoke filled the cockpit as circuit boards melted and displays flickered their last. Her body stays strapped to the chair, her grip loose as she fought with her consciousness. Many plasma rounds had cut through her body and into her fighter. Blood pooled beneath the flight harness, floating in crimson bubbles in the failing artificial gravity. Her final expression was one of grim satisfaction, features frozen in death's cold embrace. The missile slipped past untouched, riding her sacrificial interference straight into the frigate's hull, exactly as she'd planned in that split-second decision between life and duty. The warhead's detonation created a brilliant flower of destruction against the vessel's armor, her final gift to ensure humanity's victory. A blinding flash consumed the sky. The frigate's massive frame buckled and split apart, secondary explosions chain reacting through its superstructure. Burning debris rained down as the vessel's antimatter core breached, turning the morning into temporary noon. The shock wave rattled every ship in the assault fleet, and for several seconds the battle paused as both sides absorbed the spectacular destruction. This is White Company. We have made landfall, beginning assault over. The radio crackled from the jet's damaged Comm system. The transmission breaking up into static-filled fragments. The signal wavered one final time, a ghostly echo of the pilot's last message before it finally shorted out completely. Her jet, now little more than twisted metal and burning fuel, impacted the churning water below in a violent spray of ocean. And debris. Asterisk, before we start, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. Only 4% of my channel is subscribed. When it reaches 1,000 subscribers, I will release a special video. The first sign was a whisper in the void and anomaly detected.